I've made myself a vanilla matcha with vanilla oat milk and vanilla ice cream. So delicious. Now let's talk about the best books of 2024. Okay, so I got out my Goodreads and I've had a look at all the books I've rated 5 stars this year. There has been 7, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 thus far. It is the very end of November today, so potential for a good book to come up in December. And I've also got 2 special mentions that, if were possible, I'd probably give a Goodreads review of 4.5. But because you can't give half stars, sore point in the Goodreads community, there have been 4. And they're just 2 of the 4s that I want to talk about because I still think about them, and that is the sign of a powerful book. So, in no particular order, just the order my Goodreads has put them in, but I do want to start with the first book of the year that I read, which was Sunbathing by Isabel Beach. Now, this started off my year with a bang. It was the first book that I read and an immediate 5-star review, so can't ask for more than that. The reason I picked this up is it's set between Melbourne, where I'm from, and the Abruzzo region in Italy, where my family's from. So it was a given for me. I want to read out what I wrote on my Goodreads review. So I wrote, "This book was such a tender portrayal of grief and its myriad of reactions, paired with beautifully descriptive language outlining the simple living of an Italian summer. The random bursts of humour in the form of relatable sentences and reactions, usually placed straight after a lyrical descriptive passage, got me every time. So clever and unexpected and fun. Could get a sense of these characters' personality beyond the grief and simple living. Thought the reflections on social media and modern life were accurate too. As an Italian Australian, I enjoyed this book being set across both the places I am from, and am left craving fresh, simple food straight from the garden." I love books that have lyrical descriptions that really accentuate the setting, and the setting is as much of the character as any of the other characters. This book made me laugh, which I also loved. So it was like this combination of beautiful description plus humour. So I'd highly, highly recommend, especially if you're from Melbourne or Italy, as both those places are referenced. Another 5-star review and recent read is Taboo by Hannah Ferguson. I have this book, but I just lent it to a friend because I want all my friends to read it. It's that good. This is Conversations We Never Had About Sex, Body Image, Work and Relationships. This is what I said about this one. "I loved reading this and raced through it. Love a book that makes me angry and feel things. Lots of conversation starters and things to think about. I enjoyed this personally a lot more than Bite Back. The girls in my book club know I found that one a little bit too intelligent. This one's just super relatable. It talks more about Hannah, who we love, and her experiences. It talks about all these topics and why they're taboo and how they shouldn't be, and we should be having conversations about them, and it's definitely one I would recommend for all the girls out there. So check it out. I've got a copy I can lend around if you like." So another book that I rated 5 stars this year was Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Now, this is a classic. I'd never read it. I didn't know a lot about it, but my friend insisted I read it because it's one of his favorite books, and I'm really glad that I did. I even bought a copy, and it's rare for me to buy books, but I know I want to read this multiple times. This is what I said about it. "I really enjoyed this, different to what I usually read with the abstract and time travel aspects, but it flowed seamlessly between times and years and locations and situations. Impressive writing and such a unique concept. Glad my friend recommended it, keen to read more Vonnegut." And it's funny I said that because I then started to read Cat's Cradle and I couldn't get into that and actually did not finish it. So I will try another time, but this one was a classic. So different. It touches on World War II. It touches on time travel and space travel. It's a little bit abstract, but it's one guy reflecting on his life experiences, and such a fascinating read. It's pretty short as well. Another book that I read for the first time this year was Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. I know lots of people read this in high school and I can see why. I loved this. I thought it was so well written for like a dreary, miserable setting where not much happens in the book. I was absolutely hooked. I cannot put it down. This is what my Goodreads review said about this one. For a book where not much happened, I was hooked. The setting is so atmospheric and really sets the gloomy scene. The characters are nuanced and it's interesting seeing their transformation, particularly in Margaret over time. My heart was racing at the end. A great read. So, if you haven't read this and you didn't study it at school, I would highly recommend. It's set in Iceland in the 1800s and it's as drab as you imagine that setting to be, but it follows this story about a woman accused of murder, and it is so fascinating just seeing how that country was run at the time, how the criminal trials worked, how she's sent to live with this other family, their beliefs in her, and the ending had my heart racing, which is really impressive for a book to do. A book that I rated 5 stars, which really surprised me, and even surprises me now when I look at it, was Jay Shetty's 8 Rules of Love, How to Find It, Keep It, and Let It Go. I don't think I had high expectations from this book, but this is what I had to say about that one. A book about loving yourself, your partner, others, and the world. So much valuable advice and strategies of dealing with conflict in calmer, less reactive ways. I wanted to highlight so much, and I think this is a book everyone should buy and reread at various points throughout their relationships. I just thought they were really practical tips, important advice, and things you can pick up midway through a relationship and turn to that chapter specifically and get some strategies and ways of dealing with things. So that was my surprise read of the year. Next up we have Blue Sisters by Coco Melors. I think I already talked about this in a video. I loved Cleopatra and Frankenstein, Coco's first book. So I was always going to read this, but I did delay a bit because it was about sisters and family, which is not usually what I go for, but this is what I said. Coco Melors is such a brilliant writer. Blue Sisters is another win in her books with beautifully developed characters that explores the special relationship between sisters, from the nastiest fights to the deepest of love. A theme of addiction and how the different characters deal with it runs throughout, and the book takes place in Paris, New York, LA, and London. Highly recommended, especially if you have sisters. And this was a beautifully written book. All the nuances and little descriptions of the characters really add up to these fully formed people. And it's really refreshing seeing a realistic take of the highs and lows of family life, this theme of addiction, and yeah, highly recommend. And I think you'll get even more out of it than I did if you do have sisters. And of course, my latest 5-star read is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney, a fan favourite of the year. I'm going to read out my reflection first, as I cover a lot in here. Sally Rooney's best yet. Such intelligent writing covering different types of relationships and the unique challenges each face. The characters are so authentic with their flaws and problems, and of course there's a dose of typical Rooney philosophical reflection, but not too much, just the perfect dabble. It's written in dual perspectives, with Peter's being difficult to get into initially with short, sharp sentences that gave me a headache, but push through because it gets so much better. I sat with this one devouring it across 2 weeks because I enjoyed diving into it so much. Highly recommended for your first Rooney or to give her a second chance. I think that sums up that one. So that's my 7 5-star reads of the year so far, but there's 2 more that I want to talk about. And the first is Evenings and Weekends by, is it Mwasin McKenna? Sorry. I heard about this from one of my favourite book reviewers, Jack Edwards, and I described it as sensuous, repulsive, and addictive. How good are those words? I said, I love books set in a sultry summer where the setting is just as much of a character. This delivered highly on that aspect and every aspect of London. The beauty and the grime was so tangible. The characters were many a mixed, intertwined bunch, which I enjoyed, despite the fact that they were all so off-putting in their own ways. They made me sad and mad and grossed out and frustrated, but they were realistic, and I guess that's why I couldn't put it down. This is a really impressive work for a debut novel, and I look forward to reading more of his work in the future. If you love books set over a sultry weekend where, again, the setting is so rich and descriptive and really adds to the plot of all these interwoven characters, or you're one of my many peers moving to London or living there at the moment, definitely recommend this one for you. And the other one I reviewed, I think in a TikTok video, and that is Kairos. This was the winner of the International Booker Prize, and well deserved if you ask me. I've just realised it's not in my reading challenge for this year. Let me find it. I never wrote a review for Kairos on Goodreads, so I must update that. But what I really liked about this book is it tells of a relationship between these two individuals, a much younger woman and an older man. He's having an affair, so it's a forbidden love, but most importantly, it's set in East Berlin, so the time of the German Democratic Republic, when the Berlin Wall was up. This poses a really interesting historical perspective of this affair because it talks about life in East Berlin, how these people feel and view the West, and then most importantly, their experience when the wall comes down and they're suddenly forced into another way of life, of capitalism, of money, of homeless people in the streets, things that just weren't in their lives beforehand. It's really fascinating perspective that I feel you don't often hear. The side of the people that were just happily living their lives in East Berlin. They weren't particularly against the system. They viewed the West as free, but they were happy, and suddenly the jarring reality of capitalism is confronting to them. And that was just a really interesting perspective. So I recommend it for that reason. The reason I didn't rate it 5 stars is because there is this bit about 2/3 of the way through where it drags a little bit, talking about their relationship and kind of how it's turned a bit negative, and the guy isn't treating her the nicest. And I did find that part quite tough to read, and just that it dragged on a little bit, but pushed through for the historical perspective you get at the end. It was really fascinating. I feel like it's really opened my mind. So Kairos and Evenings and Weekends are my close calls for the year. So that is my 7 5-star reads of 2024 so far. I'll let you know if I read any amazing books in December, but if you want to follow me on Goodreads so you can read all these reviews, it'll be linked down below. At the moment I'm reading Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty, and it's shaping up to be perhaps a 5-star read. It follows this lady who predicts these people's cause and age of death on a flight from Hobart to Sydney. She goes along and tells each person essentially when and how they're going to die. It follows their lives after that and how they take action to try and prevent these causes of deaths. I'm midway through. I don't know what's happened. At the moment, they're trying to find this woman to demand answers to these predictions, and I can't put it down. I'm hooked. It's a big book, but I am loving it, and I'm not really a huge Liane Moriarty fan, although I did like Big Little Lies. So there's another contender that might make the 5-star list for 2024. I did meet my reading goal this year. I think I didn't last year, so I set it a bit lower this year. I set it at 32 books and I've read 42. So I'm doing well, and I'll probably knock out maybe 1 or 2 more for the rest of the year. Stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed this. If you want more book content, let me know. I would absolutely love if you could comment down below some of your favorite reads from the year or books you're looking forward to next year. And if not, I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Honestly, so good.